Revelation 18 says, "After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. He cried out with a mighty voice, saying, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, and she has become a dwelling place of demons, and a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And the kings of earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, that you may not receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back even as she paid. Give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mixed twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I'm not a widow, and I will never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. The kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, and standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, Babylon the strong city. For in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore, cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones, pearls and fine linens, purple and silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory, and every article made from very costly wood, and bronze and iron and marble, and cinnamon and spice, and incense and perfume, and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour, wheat and cattle and sheep, cargoes of horses and chariots, slaves and human lives. And the fruit you long for has gone from you, and all the things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. The merchants of these things who became rich from her will stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. For in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste. And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor, and as many as make their living by the sea, stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. And a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus will Babylon the great city be thrown down with violence, and will not be found any longer. And the sound of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will not be heard in you any longer. No craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer. And the sound of the mill will not be heard in you any longer. And the light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who had been slain on the earth. And so as we looked in chapter 17 about who Babylon was, at this point, Pascal asked the question, who is Babylon? Well, we can kind of get an idea of who Babylon is by the judgment that God's pronouncing here. So let's just look through it and see if we can apply this to anybody or any group of people or nations today. So first of all, what we see is an angel coming down from heaven. The unique thing about this angel is this angel, the word angel means messenger, has great authority. And the earth is illumined with his glory. Who has glory enough to illumine the earth? Jesus does. It's possible that it's Christ coming down to the earth. So he's in a separate part of this vision as he's looked through history past and saw all of the heads of Babylon. And as he sees Babylon come to the end of it, he sees this strong angel come out of heaven. And the whole earth is illumined by his glory. So we know in the days of the 10 toes, as we looked at last week, a strong angel is going to come. Jesus is going to come and set up his kingdom. The whole earth is going to be illumined by his glory. Now when Daniel saw this vision, and it was Nebuchadnezzar who was the head, what was Nebuchadnezzar thinking about? His own glory. So much so that he made a statue. It was all gold. It was all him. It was all about him. And he said, I'm the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he was, at that time, the strongest king in the world. I'm king of the world, right? So, but he came to understand that he wasn't. And there was another king greater than he. But in this moment, at the very end, the strong angel comes. Has great authority. Earth is illumined with his glory. And he cries out. It's Jesus who cries out. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Where else do we find that wording? In the book of Revelation, chapter 14. As we looked earlier through this, there was a war in heaven, the beast from the sea, the beast from the earth, the lamb was with the 144,000, and then we had the vision of the 6 angels who show up. In verse 8, another angel, a second one, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And then there's the warning, for those who receive the worship of the mark of the beast and worship him, they're going to receive the full wrath of God. And so we're seeing the setup for the wrath of God from another perspective. As John's in the wilderness looking at Babylon, and he's trying to figure out who Babylon is, and then these actions start happening, and the angel shows up, and he sees the judgment on Babylon. He's seeing this chapter 14 from another perspective. The focus is Babylon and what's going to happen against Babylon. The smoke of their torment rises up, and then what we find is, in verse 14, someone sitting on a white cloud, like the Son of Man, having a golden crown on his head, and he reaps the earth. Well, hold that thought for a second. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She's become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every unclean spirit, a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. We see on the rise in our world, and especially in our nation, this rise of demons, demon possession. People who are their minds bent. All of the things that our world is pushing, the trans agenda, the normalization of pedophilia, all the crazy things that go along with that, it's really a demonic issue. Yes, it has physical consequences and actions that go with it, but we see, even in the United States, the reason why we cannot raise up an army now in our country is because there's so many people with mental issues. There are a lot of people who are mentally unstable. I mean, this is not news, okay? The U.S. military has not been able to reach their quota of healthy individuals for a very long time for various reasons that include mental issues and drug abuse. Hold on to that drug abuse, because we're going to come back to that at the end of this. The United States is being weakened from within, and so one of the reasons why those who are inside the United States government want the people coming across the border to come across the border, the thing that they're offering them is citizenship if you serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. If you can't find stable people here, we'll get them from another place. Well, then that gets into the whole issue of human trafficking. And again, that shows up here in this passage. So we have this whole issue within our own country. And our country is not alone in this. The rise of mental issues, the rise of demonic possession, the rise of lives being ruined because of instability in the mind, the body, and the spirit. Well, he says Babylon the Great became a dwelling place of demons and unclean spirits. What did Jesus say about the person who has a demon cast out of them?
Well, if it's clean, then it could come back.
Sure. So a person gets set free, their house gets cleaned up. Demon comes back. 7 more, it gets worse. Would the demon be able to come back if that person, after they had their life set free and cleaned out, was filled with the Holy Spirit? No, I don't believe so. So people can get their life cleaned up, they can be set free from things, but because they go back to it over and over and over again, it gets worse. And you see that even with people that you know. They've wrestled with something, and they never got complete freedom. They got freedom for a little while, and then they went back to it, and it got worse, and then their life's a mess. Homelessness is on the rise all around us. One of the issues that really affects the homeless community is mental instability. It's one of the reasons they're homeless. I realize that there are some people who choose that lifestyle because they just don't want anything else to do with life, but there are many people, and you don't have to go very far to see this. The people riding bikes through town, most of those people have some mental issues. Okay, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to tell you, this is not New York City. This is right here in Lucedale, Mississippi, in the middle of nowhere. And if it's happening here, it's happening in every little place, every little nook and cranny in our country. But it's not just our country. It's everywhere. Other countries have the same issues. So Babylon the Great became a dwelling place of demons, unclean spirits, and unclean and hateful birds. I'll have to do a little research on that part of it to see what kind of birds we've got around us. But, we have buzzard roosts in Lucedale. We got a lot of birds around here. Just throwing that out there. I'm not necessarily saying anything about that. Well, one of the things that happens is all of the nations have become drunk with the wine of the passion over immorality. They all join together. All of the nations, not just one. It wasn't isolated to just one. All the nations are in on it. So what John is seeing here is a globalization of this. What's being spread abroad in our world today? We don't have a local economy. We have a global economy. It's not just local warming, it's global warming. Everything is global, right? We're all interconnected globally, and so all the nations are involved with it. It's not just one. They're drunk. What does everybody want? More money, more power, more goods, more stuff. And what they really need is freedom from all of that. And when Jesus sets up his kingdom, he will set us free from all of that. Kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. Just jump into the geopolitical system. How many people in politics, how many people on the highest levels of politics do you think are clean? Nobody. Why? Why is that?
They promote themselves.
It's a promotion of sin. Everybody's involved with sensuality. Somebody's got a videotape, a recording, a compromising situation. And you don't get there if you don't play along with those games, right? And if you don't, and somehow you get there mistakenly, and they didn't want you there, what do? They kill you. They destroy you. They destroy your life. You get disappeared. Well, things happen. All of the things that you see in the news affect all the nations. There's more to the struggle between East and West, between Russia and USA, than just I don't like you. It's a theological issue. It's a how do we live as a society issue. It is a direction issue. What level of immorality are you willing to accept? Well, many people who find fame, fortune, and power have jumped in headlong, and they're involved with all sorts of wickedness. And if I was to mention those things, it would just make us want to throw up. It's just disgusting what they get involved with. And those things are seen as normal, although we don't see it. We see glimpses of it and people talk about it in code, but we don't see that. We see a little bit of it, but it's the people who are on the highest level. It is the politicians, the presidents, the kings, but it's also the business leaders. Who's involved with the WEF, the World Economic Forum? The economic leaders, right? It's the people who run businesses. So they're all joining together. It's not just the kings, it's the merchants. Well, they've all joined together. They're all committing acts of immorality, and the merchants are becoming rich. I'm not saying that if you have a successful business, it's because you're doing the wrong thing, but on those upper levels, there are people who get compromised. Think about Bill Gates. There's a lot of things that come out about him. I don't know what he's done. I've not witnessed any of that, but people have videos. People have things. Well, just pick your highest level person. Everybody's on the board of all those companies, and they're all interconnected. Okay, so money and power and sexual immorality, it all goes together. So God says this is what's happening in Babylon. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." Do you want to know where the rapture is? Come out of her, my people. In chapter 11, or chapter 14, we see Jesus on the white cloud, and he reaps the earth. He puts in his sharp sickle, and he reaps the earth. Come out of her, my people. He does that before pouring out his wrath. In chapter 18, we see a voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and you may not receive of her plagues. So the Lord delivers his people out of Babylon, whatever Babylon is. I don't think Babylon is located in just one place. It's the whole earth. But it can be represented by a city in one place. And that very well may be the case here. So God says, come out of her. He brings his people out of Babylon before Babylon is judged. The Lord calls for his own, and he brings them to himself. And then he pours out judgment. We're not destined for wrath. We're destined for salvation. And so here Jesus brings his own out. The strong angel comes. The whole earth is filled with his glory. A voice from heaven calls to his people, and he removes them from Babylon, from the world, so that they will not participate in her sins as it continues, and then they won't receive her plagues. Think about all the things that we're involved with. Do we want to be involved with certain things that are going to bring down judgment upon us? I think we really need to be careful as we go forward into this world in which we are. And the more we see it deteriorating, and I believe that Christ is going to return, the more we see those things develop, the less we need to be involved with the world system. You don't need to become a hermit and go find yourself a hole in the ground. That's not what I'm saying. Be involved with the people in your life, but be careful about what you involve yourself with. So think about what you're buying and where you're spending money and how you're living, and think, do I really want to support this? Do I really want to support this with how I'm living? Because we don't think about it. There was a book by Randy Alcorn. Maybe you've heard of him, but he's a great writer out of the Pacific Northwest. He wrote about, the book was called Safely Home, and it really kind of struck me because it was a story about some Chinese people who were being persecuted for their faith, and they were, part of their punishment was they were in slave camps making shoes, making Christmas lights, just mundane things that we use all the time, and we don't think about where our money is going and what slavery it is supporting. So that might be something to think about, just to think about it. Well, God says this after he pulls his people out: pay her back double. Give her twofold. Give her double. Back to her double according to her deeds. Mix twice for her. To the degree she glorified herself and lived sensually, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. This has been going on for a really long time. It's not new. The world empires have been around for a long time. It showed up in various forms, from Babel, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Persia, Rome. And Rome includes us today because we're from Roman descent, all the way through the English Empire to the British Empire to where we're at today with the United States, and even the Islamic system and all the other parts of the world. It is all interconnected. And whether we like it or not, the United Nations is here. It's in the United States. So we're part of that system in some ways. We're all affected by it. And there's been a lot of things that have been going on. War, it happens because of trade. Why were we in Afghanistan? Why were the English in Afghanistan? Why were other countries in Afghanistan? Well, it's because of the poppies and the opium trade. So we've been involved in South America through the CIA because of the drug trade. So those things have been happening. This is not new. And it goes back into antiquity. People buying and selling and it's human lives and slavery and economics just to be able to somebody get ahead. And it's probably some decrepit, wretched old man who can't even enjoy all the wealth he has, sitting in a room by himself. And he's just sitting around with his money, right? And he doesn't get to enjoy any of it, but he just enjoys seeing people suffer so he could gain more. That's the way the world works. And we're out here trying to pursue the American dream when we should really just be content with what the Lord's given us. I'm not saying don't be proactive about certain things, but we really need to think about what's the most important thing. And it's not more goods. It's not more physical wealth. It's the relationships that we have. It's how we live and how we honor God. Well, God says pay her back double. Pay her back to the extent that she did this and even more. Babylon says, I sit as a queen, I'm not a widow. Well, we know in Babylon's early history, their king died. Nimrod died. His wife took over. Semiramis said, I'm not a widow. I'm a queen. Didn't even acknowledge the death of her husband. So no, worship me. She became the woman riding the beast, and everybody hated her for it. They loved her and hated her for it. And eventually, it's going to be her demise. And this is what the scripture says. She says, I'll never see mourning. And God says, yes, you will. You will see mourning. You're going to see it, and you're going to mourn, and everybody else will mourn with you. For that reason, for this reason, because of what she did, her immorality, her iniquities, all of the sin that she committed, for this reason, in one day her plagues will come. Pestilence, mourning, and famine. And she will be burnt up with fire. How long did it take for Sodom and Gomorrah to burn to the ground? A morning. How long will it take for Babylon the Great to be burned up? 1 hour. Okay, so just think about how hot that fire is. How complete that destruction is. How fierce the wrath of God is because of that. And it says, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. A lot of people say, well, where is God in the middle of all this wicked world when children are being abused and people are being abducted and all of those things? Why does God let this thing happen? God's not idly sitting by. He's going to judge. Well, we should do whatever we can to save those people and to bring them back and rescue them. We should be opposed to those things. If you see someone being taken, stop them. If you see someone going down that path where they're going to be destroyed, save them. Save them from the pits of hell. But know this, God will not be mocked, and He will judge these nations. And all of the things that have been done in secret will be brought to light, and God will judge those people. Those people who thought they got away with child murder and all of the things that go with all of that, nobody's ever going to find out about this, and no one's ever going to know. God will judge them. What did Jesus say it would be better for a person when they hurt the little ones? It would be better if they had a millstone tied around their neck and they were cast into the sea. Well, what happens? An angel comes with a big stone like a millstone, and he casts it into the sea. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, God judges the kings of the earth, those who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her. What are they going to do? They're going to weep and mourn over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They're going to stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment. They're going to look from afar and they're going to say, woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And then the merchants, they're also going to weep. They're going to mourn over her because nobody buys their cargo anymore. You know how many ships go through the Suez Canal every day? There's so many ships out there. So much cargo being moved all the time. You may have seen some of this when the Evergreen, breached itself in the Suez Canal, and everyone's like, what are we going to do now? And they all started going around the Horn of Africa again, and just massive amounts of shipping moving every single day. What would happen if shipping stopped? We saw a glimpse of this. We would. If you didn't buy it from Temu or Amazon or Alibaba or one of those other places, you might be better off. If shipping ground to a halt, people would have to go back to agriculture. You'd have to grow your own food at your own house. We saw glimpses of this during COVID-19. It was really difficult for me to get things as mundane as a t-shirt. Okay? You just couldn't get them. I had to tell people, I know you want that, but I can't get it. A white t-shirt, I can't get it. Hey, I can't get a white t-shirt? That's crazy. All right, but who makes that? Who makes that? Some slave in a Chinese factory. The Nike shoes that everybody wants. Who makes that? Some slave in a Chinese factory. Or some other country's factory. And they're all in indentured servitude. Their cargo is gold, silver, precious stones. It's wealth. It's fine linen, purple silk and scarlet. It's clothing. It's jewelry. It's clothing. It's wood articles. It's ivory. Everything that's costly. Wood, bronze, marble, iron. Spices, food. Cinnamon, spice, incense, perfume, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour. Wheat, cattle, sheep. It's beef. Pork bellies. Think about what's traded on the open market. That is the cargo. Gone are the days in which we live, where we live in a very small society, where when you buy meat, it comes from the field just down the street. The meat you buy may have been grown in the United States, but it's likely shipped somewhere else, slaughtered, prepared, and shipped back. I know that's what was happening with the wood products out of the state of Washington where I lived in. They would harvest the trees, send it to Japan. And the Japanese would get the grade A lumber and we'd get B, C, D, and F. Right? We don't get a true 2x4 anymore. We get a 1.5 by 3.5. It's not a 2x4. You know what I'm saying? So it goes elsewhere. Where does the wood that goes into Enviva go? It goes to Europe. It goes to Japan. We're just as much involved with this. We are involved. When I was in the trailer building business, a lot of that steel came from Hungary. It came from Turkey. It came from other places across the world. Do we not have foundries here that we can't make our own stuff? Well, so what I'm saying is it's all connected. And all of these things are being shipped. Not only that, horses, chariots, automobiles, right? Slaves and human lives. Literal slaves and literal human lives. There are people being shipped in shipping containers. You see it in TV shows and movies. You do. But the truth of it is there are people who are actually being shipped in those things. And if they just happen to fall off a ship and die, oh well. Not the problem with the person who shipped it. Their hands are off of it. And if you go to the port of Los Angeles, it's automated. So it literally has a ship pull up and all of those boxes come off the ship and are moved around by robots. Uncaring, unconcerned, and this is just automation. We don't even care about it anymore. Humans probably don't even touch it until it reaches the store shelves and they pull it out of a box that came on a shipping container. Everybody loves Dollar General, and I'm not downing them, but where does all of their goods come from? All of the dollar stores, where do their goods come from? Straight out of China. You know how long it takes for that process to get to us? It takes almost a year. So the things that you bought for Christmas were made this time last year in preparation for a Christmas season. And it's this whole process of human lives and slavery and indentured servitude and goods being transferred back and forth. It's a whole thing. Well, who's guilty of that? Everybody who participates in it. From the buyer backward. The fruit you long for is gone from you. All the things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. It's coming a day, and we've already, like I said, experienced some of this, where there are some things that you may want to have on hand, and you won't be able to find them. Does that mean that you need to get a shipping container and drop it in the ground and fill it with all sorts of flour and all of that? If you want to, fine, whatever. But it's coming a day where you won't be able to find it. And it's going to come on everybody. So there's not enough prepping that you can do to save yourself in this state. Why? Well, it's the judgment of God. That's what's coming. And if we read it, Jesus says here, come out of my people so that you won't participate in her sins or plagues. So you won't need it anyways. Okay? You won't need it anyways. At that point, you won't need it. You won't need it. So the merchants who of these things who became rich from her, and there's a lot of people becoming rich from all of this. They stand at a distance because of fear of her torment. They don't want to be joined with their torment. It's these people in these other countries who are going to go, oh my goodness, it's burning up, and I don't want to be anywhere near it. I don't want to be anywhere near it. They're going to weep and mourn, saying, woe, woe, the great city. She was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. But in 1 hour, such great wealth has been laid waste. Every shipmaster, passenger, and sailors, many make living on the sea, stood by at a distance, and they were crying out, what city's like the great city? How are we going to make money anymore? How are we going to live? Where are we going to go? And where are we going to sell all the things that we have? We can't go anywhere anymore. The stock market's down. New York's destroyed. Whatever, if it's New York or London or Hong Kong or wherever it might be, the system's down. We can't make money anymore. What great wealth is gone. It's all destroyed. We can't even find it anymore. And they're crying out, what city is like the great city? And they throw dust on their heads as they cry out. It's a sign of great mourning. And they weep and mourn and say, woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships in the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she has been laid waste. That 1 hour is repeated several times in this chapter, as if to illustrate it is literally 1 hour. It didn't take very long for the wrath of God to be poured out, and everybody's just going to be standing around pouring dust on their head, just crying out, going, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? But verse 20 comes and it changes tune. Rejoice over her. The nations are weeping. The kings of the earth are weeping. The merchants are weeping. The sailors are weeping. But who's rejoicing? Who's rejoicing? Rejoice, O heaven, and you saints, apostles, and prophets, when we see God destroy this world system. As we see God dismantling it even now, what should we do? Should we say, oh no, I can't go get my Nike Air Maxes anymore? You don't need them anyways. You don't need that. Should you cry if you can't get a Chiquita banana? No. Do you know what goes on behind the scenes of that? You don't want to know. You should rejoice. Rejoice that God has pronounced judgment against her. And as that voice calls out to rejoice, a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone, a great stone from heaven, come out of heaven, and it's cast down on the 10 toes that are the 10 kings who will receive power and kingdom with the beast for an hour. Did you know that there is another economic system that's rising in this world? It's called BRICS. You may have heard of it. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a couple of other people joined them this past week. There are 10 kings involved with this.
And what's it called?
BRICS. They're developing a currency to come against the United States reserve currency. But I find it interesting that there's 10 kings, 10 nations involved with this. What is the goal of the beast on which the woman rides? What did God put in the heart of the beast on which the woman rides? It will turn on the woman and devour her. So these nations that have been taken advantage of by the woman who rides it, they will turn on the woman who rides it and devour her, because God has put it in their heart to do so. And then what does God do to them? He judges the whole thing. He judges all of it. A great millstone. Threw it into the sea, saying, thus will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will not be found any longer. Where else do we find a great stone being thrown into the sea? Revelation chapter 8. We see this. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood. A third of the sea creatures which were in the sea and had life died. And a third of the ships were destroyed. That's a preview of what's to come. A third of the ships that were producing the shipping It's enough to stop some things for a little while, but it'll still go on for a little bit longer. You still have 2/3 of the ships left. Revelation chapter 10, verse 1, the strong angel coming out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and his face was like, rainbow on his head, face like the sun, and on his feet were like pillars of fire. And he cries out, and there's an angel. As he cries, John sees the rest of this in chapter, let's see here. This is where he's standing by the sea. There's another section here, I guess I wrote the wrong one down, but that's the strong angel again. But we also see it in Revelation chapter 16. This is at the end of that part of the vision that John says. There's the 6 bowls of wrath. And the second angel in chapter 16, verse 3, a second angel poured out his bowl into the sea. It became like blood like that of a dead man, and every living thing in the sea died. All right, so he's poured out on the sea. Everything dies there. And the Lord's pouring those things out. I guess what I was looking for was... there was an angel that threw a censer down to the earth. There's several sections in the book of Revelation where something is thrown out of heaven into the sea. And there's damage caused in the sea because of it. God throws this final great millstone in the sea. And the scripture says, Babylon is thrown down with violence. With violence. And when we looked at the word violence, what we found was, in Hebrew, the word Hamas is violence. All of these things are interconnected. This whole world's interconnected. All the things that we look at out there and think, oh, this is random. It's not as random as we think it is. There is a world system that is playing both sides. Just as there are 2 legs in the statue, there are 2 sides. Do you think that when we go to vote for another president, that there's any difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party? Do you think that there's any difference? This is the Hegelian dialectic. You cause a problem to elicit a reaction, the reaction you want from people, so that you can create a solution that gets you further to the goal that you want. So they're playing both sides of it. If you want people to live in fear, what do? You cause violence in the streets. Well, who's promoting that? Who promoted the violence in the streets in the black communities in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Who was behind the drug trade? We were. The CIA was doing that. Our own people was doing that against us to destroy us from within. Who's been behind it for a long time? Satan don't care who he kills, as long as he gets to kill somebody. And so, one nation fighting against another nation, there's enough goods in this whole world to provide for everybody who lives here and more, if people would just be content with what they have. But we live in a capitalistic society that pits one nation against another based on trade. Trade is war. We're waging war through price gouging and price fixing. And all of that comes to us gaining and them losing. And then it breaks out into an actual war. And that just means more people die. People die through starvation. People die through war. People die through tyranny. And it happens everywhere. We see it everywhere. And so God says Babylon's going to be thrown down. The great city is going to be thrown down. The head of all of this is going to be thrown down. And all the nations are going to be set free from it. God set the children of Israel free from the oppression of Egypt. God's going to set this world free from the oppression of Satan and his world system. And God says this, none of this is going to be found anymore. The sound of the harpist, the musicians, flute players, trumpeters, no more musicians. Everybody's infatuated with Taylor Swift or whoever your, favorite artist is. And none of that's going to matter anymore. No craftsmen. No more factories. Well, Ingalls Shipbuilding has provided for many, many families in this area. But what is the goal of Ingalls Shipbuilding? I mean, they're building warships, right? Okay, so our families, and I worked there. They taught me a trade, right? Okay. I traded my indentured servitude, so to speak, for building warships. Well, we don't need any of that anymore. So it's going to be gone. No more factories. There won't be the sound of a mill anymore. We won't need all this stuff that everyone's cranking out. No need for these big t-shirt mills and clothing mills and all of the other things of the mills. There's all sorts of mills, General mills, we won't need any more of that because, hey, you're going to go out in your yard and grow food, right? In the millennium, it's going to be totally different. God says you won't need any of that anymore. The light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer. There goes your electricity. Won't need that. Well, what does the Lord do in the millennial kingdom? It's going to be really cold this week. It's going to be really cold. There's going to be a lot of people who are unprepared for that. But I think that the Lord is going to change the way that this world responds to this during the millennial kingdom. He's going to make it a temperate climate all year long. It's going to be love, joy, peace forever, in His kingdom. We won't have that. We won't need it. We won't have to worry about, is there enough firewood for that? The Lord will take care of all of that. He'll change the climate so that it's a better climate, more conducive for life, and people will live longer and it'll be healthier. Think about how healthier you would be if you didn't eat food that was made in a factory. You won't have to worry about that, You'll be eating it from a plant, but that plant will be in your front yard. So those are things that God's going to take care of. He's judging the entire thing. He's judging the whole system, the whole system that goes with it. The light of the lamp won't shine in you. The voice of the bride and bridegroom won't be heard in you any longer. That really touches base. That really hurts. There won't be anybody to get married in that place. There won't be anybody. There won't be anybody. The merchants were the great men of the earth. No longer are we just simply ruled by kings, presidents. The gross domestic product of the Amazon company is greater than many, many, many nations. There are multinational corporations that wield more power and have bigger armies than the nations in which they operate. We've seen this in our own day, in the past several hundred years, where companies have become bigger than nations. So much so that they pretty much force nations to do whatever they want. I think the Chiquita Banana Company actually wanted to take over Honduras for a while, and they actually did it for a while. Some of these things that occurred, we think about like what happened on Maui not too long ago. Well, the Dole Company with pineapples, they basically took over Hawaii for a while because of the pineapples. So, and those are just two examples. But the East India Company, they were known for this. They'd go in and lay waste to places, and they would use their economic prowess and their armies and their military to do whatever they wanted to, and they would drag people off into slavery because of it. But they're not isolated. These are not isolated incidences. There are other companies that do this and have been known to do it. Well, the merchants were the great men of the earth. These are the ones who are leading at the very end. It's not just elected presidents and kings. It's unelected people who have great power. Who gives it to them? We're buying from them. So what do we do? What can we do? We just have to choose to live differently. We don't have to participate in that. Do with that what you will, but there's a lot of people who are going back to baking their own bread. There are a lot of people going back to making their own clothing. There are a lot of people who are saying, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm going home and I'm just going to enjoy life. I'm not going to participate in this any longer. I wrestle with that. To what extent do I participate in this? Well, all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. Sorcery. The word is pharmakeia. It's drugs. Some of the biggest companies in this world are drug companies. How many of you are on drugs? Now, I'm not saying, cocaine and heroin and that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of people on Plavix and, just name them. I mean, there's a million of them, right? With different names that we can't even pronounce. Like, I think about how in the world did they come up with these drug names? Do you really need that stuff?
And what's the difference in an addiction or something, and then, people that's really in pain can't get pain medicine. And
Absolutely.
then we have to take our blood pressure. You know, man. Ooh.
There's a lot of those medications that people are prescribed that interact with one another in negative ways. And so you got to take another pill to counterbalance the interaction. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes this downward spiral. Well, people are deceived by their pharmakeia. Maybe you got deceived and you took a vaccine that you really didn't need. I can't tell you how many people were deceived into that. You know, just this past week, Fauci admitted there's no scientific basis for you to stand 6 feet apart from somebody. Come on, did we not know that anyways? Honestly? Do you really think that an 1/8-inch plexiglass screen that's just right here can keep things from going around it? Or over it or under it? No. People have been deceived. Yeah. So we just we can look back on some of that and go, well, that's ridiculous. I can't tell you how many people, and I honestly, I wore masks for a little bit. I made them. I even sold a few of them. And, you know, I got to thinking about it, and the more I thought about it, I was like, you know, this is ridiculous. And I got to seeing how people were wearing them, and I'm like, it's not doing any good. When you're fiddling with your mask every 5 seconds and you're spreading it all over whatever you're touching, it's communicable. Okay.
Take your mask off to sleep.
Yeah. So some of that it became ridiculous. Well, people were deceived by that. People are deceived into thinking that you can take some shot and it's going to save your life. It's going to make you lose weight. It's going to make you look better. It's going to make your lips plumpier or whatever that is. And some of that's just ridiculous anyways. I've seen some of these people get the injections and it's like, you know, their face looks distorted. And for some reason, we're deceived into thinking that this is what we need. God wants you to be healthy. God wants you to be natural. God wants you to enjoy what He made, not be deceived into thinking that these man-made things are somehow going to save us and save our life. No. Get out there, walk, eat right, exercise, stay away from the sugars and, you know, honor the Lord in that. Well, God says you're not going to find any of that anyways. It's all going to be gone. All of that's going to be gone. You won't find any of that any longer. I think it's the book of Zechariah that says there won't be any Canaanites. There won't be any merchants found. There's not going to be any corner store selling stuff anymore. That would change everything. I love me a good hurricane. You know why? Everything shuts down. And we get to enjoy a little bit of time off, maybe without electricity, and you see what's exactly important in life. Am I wishing that we get one this year? No, but I did pray for one the first year I moved down here. And we got a small one, Hurricane George. It went right over George County. I did not pray for Hurricane Katrina. But God knows exactly what we need. And so, you know, this is going to, think about it. When you throw a big millstone into the sea, what are the natural consequences of that? Well, it's a lot of destruction, a lot of tsunamis, a lot of weather pattern changes. It's going to be disastrous for everybody. And everyone's going to stand back and go, oh my goodness, all of these things. Well, in her was found the blood of prophets, saints, and all who have been slain on the earth. In this world system that fights with trade and war all through the ages, everybody who's died because of that their blood is going to be found in Babylon. Well, God gave Daniel a vision, Nebuchadnezzar a vision of this system. It's a long-lasting system. But it's in the days of the toes that great millstone from heaven gets thrown down and God says, it's done. It's complete. Its destruction is complete. What are we to do? How should we respond?
You just have to trust in God that it's His plan and
Yeah, absolutely.
That He's going to take care of us.
He will.
We just do what we
do. That's the main. That's all we can do.
Let's be wise. Let's consider how we live. Let's consider how not to be deceived by pharmakeia, drugs, and finances. Let's not be in debt as much as we possibly can. Let's just live a clean life and honor the Lord. But when God starts dismantling the system, we should rejoice. We should rejoice. The Lord knows exactly what he's doing. And he's going to take care of all that. Well, that's the next part. Out of heaven comes a great rejoicing. As the Lord destroys this world system, the kingdom of the beast is destroyed, and there is rejoicing. And there's the marriage supper of the Lamb, a great wedding, a feast, a great time of rejoicing. And Jesus comes back and he crushes the armies that have risen up against him, those people who are left. There won't be many people left, but the Lord will crush them, his enemies. He'll judge them, and he'll set up his kingdom, and he'll make this. The whole creation is crying out for Jesus to return. And those who are in the millennial kingdom will get to enjoy the peace of God with Christ reigning on the earth. They'll rejoice. They'll rejoice. We want God's great reset. I don't want man's reset. I want God's reset. I want the Lord to come. I want him to take care of this. Jesus even himself, when he was on the earth, he said, "Oh, how I wish that fire were kindled right now. I want it to happen now. I want to do it now. I want to do it now before any more people in this world get hurt." He wanted to do it then. His great wrath is great, it's fierce, and it's total and complete. And it's justified. Well, where do the kings of the earth gather in our world? It's just one thought to end with. What city has been destroyed more times on film than anybody else? New York City. So, is God trying to tell us something? Why were the Twin Towers, targets? They were a symbol of economics, world economic power. The Lord knows exactly what he's doing. That wasn't the wrath of God. That's just a preview of it. The Lord can destroy it any way he wants to. He's going to completely destroy all of it. So we should not put our hope in this world, but we should rejoice as God pours out his wrath.